Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Yes, we are back, and he is an award-winning author of 2 books, working on his 3rd right now, and his name is Larry Deiman. Great to have you back, Larry. How you doing?
Good, Steve. How you doing?
Doing great. Doing very well.
Glad to be back. It's always fun talking to you.
Same here, and I love the fact that we can get behind the mind of an author and how the whole process works, because I find it fascinating how the ideas come. We have a clean slate. We can do whatever we want in that. And the 2 books we're referring to is Incident at the Historic Museum and Canyon Springs Wash Murders. Those are 2. You can find them on Amazon and also at trevorsadventure.com. Right. You're working on the 3rd book, so don't tell me you worked with 6, 7, 8, at least 8 chapters in, right?
8 chapters in, yeah. I just finished my 8th chapter last night, actually.
Oh, wow. Okay. And when was
I had this inspiration, so I thought, what the heck?
You last time I talked, I think we were at 6 chapters, right?
We were. So I got a couple of chapters done this week. I'm just pushing on. I mean, I keep getting these ideas, these inspirational ideas that I want to put on paper, and I got to be honest that this is the rough draft. This is not. I mean, I'm doing 1 chapter at a time, and when I get to the end of the book, I'll read the whole book, and invariably I'll make some changes along the way. Maybe I don't like the way the storyline's going, or I'll try to make some change that'll make an impact on the book and on the reader. And I want the reader to get into it and really become part of the book, part of the story. And that's what I did with the first 2 books. Incident at the Historical Museum was particularly interesting because the readers can actually feel themselves being transformed into the movie, or into the story, which I hope will be a movie someday.
Of course.
Same thing with Canyon Springs Wash Murder. I mean, there's a lot of action, and I want the reader to be a part of that. And I'm hoping that some producers in Hollywood will think of it the same way that I do, and give me a call someday and want to change my life. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, it sounds like you're on the right path with the story and the characters, which center around Trevor and Jason. And Trevor, now which one? I always get it confused, but Trevor's the one that works for the FBI. I'm sorry, the FBI. And he's a pinnacle part in book 3, unnamed. You're working on it now, as we said. What happens? What happens with Trevor in that book?
Well, he's got a nemesis that popped back up after a couple of years, and this nemesis is taunting him. And what he's doing is it's allowing Trevor to travel the country because he's chasing this guy down. I can't tell you who this guy is, because if I do, it'll ruin book 1, book 2, because book 1. Because this nemesis popped up in book 1. So I don't want to reveal his name, because that would reveal too much, I think. I want the readers to read the book. I want your listeners to read the books. And they'll get there. I mean, book 3 is mostly about Trevor and Jason as a team going across the country chasing this guy. And a lot of things happen along the way. A lot of action, a lot of unfortunately, a lot of death. In book 2, we had a number of people who had died, a number of people that were almost killed because of things that were happening in the book. In book 3, Trevor and Jason are trying to minimize that, as well as trying to capture this guy and not kill him. They want him to go back to prison because he escaped from prison. We want to get him back to prison, and not sure how that's going to end yet. He might die, he might not. I don't know yet. Haven't decided.
Didn't you mention at one point something about traveling to the southern part of the United States, somewhere near Mexico? Was that just a working idea, or did that make it?
That's a working idea.
Okay.
That's going to be more towards the end of the book. I'm not sure where it's going to go yet, but because of the Mexican connection in all in both my first book and this book, the third book, I thought it'd be kind of appropriate to have something going on between the Mexican and the American border, somewhere around there. And at the beginning of this book, and it's not a spoiler alert to say that Trevor had the FBI shut down the Mexican-American borders because they didn't want this nemesis to get across the border and disappear. Because he's got a lot of friends in the Mexican community, and we're afraid that, or the FBI is afraid that if we left the borders open, he can easily cross. And if you're in America, you can cross into Mexico easily because there's no stopping you there. It's just a matter of coming back where you get stopped. So you can actually go in. If you're in America, you can get into Mexico without being stopped, without having them checking your passport or nothing. But coming back is the problem. So we don't want his nemesis to get into Mexico. So out of the book, we stopped that from happening by closing the borders down. But the FBI closed down the borders to Mexico, so they have to stay in the United States, which is covers a lot of territory. But I got a lot of things going on in the book that are action-packed that are going to hopefully be as good as the other two books. We'll see.
It seems like you have to do your homework. You got to do a lot of research to make sure these all jive together. I don't know about, the Mexico part. I'm trying to think of the last time. It's been years since I was on vacation there.
Me too.
Guess I passed through customs. I'm trying to remember how that went down.
Yeah. I've been through customs between the U.S. and Mexico. I've been into Tijuana, to Nogales. I mean, it really is easy to get from America into Mexico. Well, I haven't been through to Mexico since the pandemic started, so I don't know if that's still true. But back a few years ago, you could go from the U.S. into Mexico without being stopped, without having to show your passport or anything. It's when you come back that the Mexican authorities at the border will check your passport and make sure that you aren't bringing anything in from Mexico that you shouldn't be, like illegal substances, God forbid,
Right. I wonder, then we talk about that. If this was a book about, let's say, a couple romance, it's not going to have such very detailed facts. But since we are centering on the FBI, there's more detail there. Has anybody, Larry, ever called you out on it? Even the publisher?
Nope.
On a fact?
Nobody, because I try to be as vague as possible.
Okay.
When it comes to FBI facts, because one thing I don't want is them knocking on my door. Saying
neither do any of us.
Yeah, exactly. So I try to be vague. I mean, it's not illegal or against the law to include the FBI in a book, in a fictional book, because the FBI is the FBI. It's a government organization, and there's no stipulation that you can't use that. But what I do is I make sure that my facts are correct when it comes to actual
locations, things like that.
Yeah. I try to make the locations correct, like FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C. In my first book, there's actually a corner, where you can find them, and it's in my book. But yeah, I'm factual. Same thing with the museums. I mean, the museum is fictional, but the facts about the museum are not. All the facts that I put in the first book about the museum are correct. I had to do research and make sure that I was being accurate about that, even though it was a fictional museum. Same thing with the FBI. I mean, if I'm vague about details, the FBI can't come after me. But my publishers, I assume, look for that, make sure that there's nothing that's inappropriate or anything that would get us in trouble.
Do you ever watch TV and come up with an idea, like you're watching, CSI or whatever? It's like, gotta write that one down.
All the time, all the time. Because a lot of the shows I watch are shows like Hawaii Five-0, NCIS. I don't watch the FBI shows that are on. I mean, you got to cut it off somewhere. I
Mm.
mean, I watch a lot of those kind of programs, and I enjoy watching those because I do get ideas. I mean, I change it a little bit so it doesn't look like I'm stealing it
Sure.
from the show, but I get good ideas of things that I can do along the way,
You
like
were
this, like
you were
this,
inspired. I could, you know what I call it? I don't call it copying. Inspired.
inspired. Exactly,
Right.
exactly. I get inspired by ideas that from programs. I mean,
Sure.
just a thought about something that they might have come up with, or they might have thought of, and of course I'll change it so it's mine. But a lot of times, that's where you get a lot of good ideas. I mean, it's not stealing; it's just complimenting those that come up with those ideas or those stories. And I don't steal the story. I mean, the stories are mine, but some of the ideas, some of the things that are going on along the way, like in book 3, we're going across the country, so we're doing a lot of things along the way that aren't from other shows, but I get an idea from other shows that I put in the book. Just an idea of where I can go with something. You know, and the actual place that we end up is not in anybody's story right now. It's my own story. I
Right.
just how we get there might be something that I got an inspiration from a show I watched. You
So
know.
I wonder, we're at we're at book 3 in
Mhm.
this series. Let's let's say we went to book 4 or 5 and you're kind of tapping the brakes.
Right.
Now you're thinking about a different book and a different scenario, not I mean completely different. Trevor and Jason not here. Not in
Okay.
this next book. What would it center on? So we center, there's a lot about the FBI in this book. What would the other be?
I don't know. I don't know that I would probably not use a government agency again. I mean, the FBI kind of fit to my story
Sure.
in my first book, and that kind of carries it through to the next book and the next book, and maybe into the next book.
Yeah,
One thing about having
where I'm getting at, what I'm getting at is like, let's say you enjoy the woods, and let's say it's thinking about a book about maybe a sheriff that's in, Wyoming, and he's doing his own thing. That, that kind of, is there anything that's inside you that you're like, maybe
oh
one day
yeah,
I'll write a book about that?
oh absolutely. I've got when I was young, much younger, when I was growing up, there was a town in Minnesota, northern Minnesota. It's a town of 600 people. It's a real small town. It's the town that my mom grew up in. And we used to spend a lot of our summers there when we were kids.
Hmm.
Right up into the time that I was 18, 20 years old. And I obviously visited there a number of times since I became an adult. But I can think of a lot of good material that I can use in a book someday. It doesn't fit in the book in the storylines that I'm doing today, but yeah, I can see a new series down the road that would include a whole new scenario,
Yeah.
and it wouldn't be Trevor and Jason, it might be somebody else,
Right.
But what's nice is that I mean, this is a small town. I mean, I did put in book 2, I did put a small town in northern Texas as my center point for my main storyline. But this is a town in northern Minnesota, and I might even keep it in Minnesota. But that's down the road. I have thought about it, but I'm not sure where it's going to go at this point. But it's a good idea, and it's funny you should mention that because I have a lot of reference material from this small town that I pretty much grew up in, and I can certainly turn it into a book.
Yeah, that's where I was going with it. Because if
Yeah.
for me personally, this is random. I love the Caribbean. I love tropical. I love it.
Yeah.
If I was going to write a book, I'd probably write a book,
You
about
know,
that.
people, the experts tell you if you're going to write a book, write about what you know. And honestly, my first two books and the book I'm working on today, um, not much in there in any of these books is about anything I know really,
Hmm.
that I brought to the table, so to speak. Book 2, for example, Canyon Springs Wash Murders, is in a town I've been to Texas, I think, once in my entire life, and I made up this town and the whole scenario has nothing to do with anything that I've ever done in my past. And same thing with book one, really.
Hmm.
I mean, I fashioned Trevor off of what I would like to be doing, what I would have liked to do when I was his age.
Sure.
But as far as the storyline, I didn't really follow that idea, write what you know, because I really don't know. I did a lot of research on book one and book two to get a lot of the facts straight, but none of it is really technically me, you know, or people that I know. I don't know anybody in the FBI, and that's probably a good thing. But
And you don't want them knowing you either, right?
I don't want them to know me either. Exactly. We'll just stay under the radar on that part.
Sure.
But
it's funny you say that. Write what you know, or it's what are you always familiar talking about? Like if you're in a group of people talking about yourself, because who knows you better than you? But I think it's also write about what you love. And this is definitely something you love. The story, the characters are based on you and your friend. So kind of, you love your relationship with your friend, and
it really is about what I mean, the characters are about what I know. Right. Not necessarily the storyline. And I will say that when I was a really small boy, just like Trevor, I did read a lot of spy magazines and comic books, and I didn't like the superheroes and stuff like that. I liked like Dick Tracy and not necessarily the spies, but the those kind of people, but the spy books and the spy magazines and all that. That's what I looked at. And I spent a lot of time as a kid reading these kind of books, and I just do that. Added that into Trevor's. I mean, I started Trevor's journey doing that. In the first chapter we talk about that, or the first couple of chapters we talk about what he did when he was a kid, how much he loved reading these kind of books, and he wanted to be a spy when he grew up. Well, they don't really call it a spy, but
right.
But the fact is that what we do is what Trevor does is what I would have liked to do, and a lot of my passion is in Trevor. Just the way I designed Trevor and made him feel like the hero of the book, so to speak. And you said it yourself. You get inspired. You get excited about how the book is coming, and how the characters are just kind of coming into play. The way you go in and just kind of mold them your way, and it's like an empty slate. Like you said, it's an empty slate. You really can write about what you want, and that's really what I've done. All three of these books have been just like that. I mean, Kenya Springs was completely out of my mind, out of my imagination. The whole book is completely out of my imagination, but it turned out to be a good reading. Same thing with book one, and it really is an empty slate when you start the book. When I started the new book, I kind of finished things off from the second book on the prologue for the third book, to just kind of keep people, reminded about what happened at the end of book two. So book three kind of follows that, but then the whole storyline takes a completely different direction.
Have you ever, and the empty slate is, I think, the most exciting part, because anything is possible.
Oh yeah.
Have you ever thrown it to people, friends, family, that give them a scenario and let them give you feedback on it? So, for example, I don't know, I'm here up to chapter 8. Should I send him down to Mexico? Should I send him to California? Do you ever get feedback like that, or it's just hands off? Really. It's you.
It's pretty much hands off. Okay. I mean, when I was writing book one, I had asked a friend of mine from work to, read the first dozen chapters or so, and let me know what you think. See if it makes any sense. Well, she unfortunately never got around to it. So I just kind of said, I'm just going to go on with my, on with it. And she did read the first book after it was published. I gave her a copy of the book, and she loved it. She said, "This is great. This is everything fits." And the ending, she said was took her completely by surprise.
Hmm.
And that's how I designed it, because I want the reader to be sitting on the edge of their seat wondering, hey, what's going to happen next? And at the end of the book, it really turns the tables completely around. You don't expect what is coming. It's completely different from what you think is going to happen. Same thing with book two. I mean, I'm not going to tell you how that ends, but I can tell you that Jason and Trevor are sent back to Washington D.C. because of an emergency, and it doesn't end the way the reader thinks it's going to end. It ends in a completely different way. That's kind of the style that I've kind of adapted throughout the series that I'm writing.
Wow.
You get on a storyline, and then you just twist it at the end, and that's what keeps the readers reading, and hopefully gets them to buy the next book. You know.
So as you hit the next chapter, let's say, did you finish 8? Are you totally done with 8?
I did finish 8. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we're looking at doing 9 sometime soon. Will you go back to 8 and see where you left off to pick up 9?
I always do. Yeah, I always do. I mean, even though I just finished 8 yesterday, what I'll do is, I may not get to 9 until probably the weekend, because I'm going to be kind of busy until probably Friday. So I may not get to book to write again until probably Saturday. And when I get to Saturday, I'm going to have to refresh my memory on what I did in chapter 8, because I want to be able to follow along. And that's what I do with all my books. I go back. I mean, I don't write the book from start to finish in one sitting. I mean, it takes me months to get to the end of the book. And in book 1, it took me 3 years. So I had to keep going back to the previous chapter to see where I was and where I left off at. And I write down my thoughts after if I don't have time to go on to chapter 9, like yesterday, it was late. I needed to get to bed. So I stopped writing. I finished chapter 8 and then I stopped there. Well, then I had some ideas that I wanted to do in chapter 9. So I'll just write my notes down and kind of remind myself when I'm ready to pick up chapter 9, where my thoughts were for 9. But I'll go back and I'll read probably 7 and 8 and see where I was going with it. And then I'll start on chapter 9, That's the way I did it all the way.
Have you ever written a chapter and said, no, and just fresh? Yeah.
When I was writing Canyon Springs Wash Murders, it was like 12 or 13. I think it was 12. What's in the book that was published is completely different than where it started out as. It came the idea when I got to like 14 or 15 on that book.
Mm-hmm.
I went back and I read like from chapter 11 on, and because I wasn't sure where I was going to go with the next chapter, and I totally did not like chapter 12, so I completely changed it. And so what's in the book is completely different from what I originally thought of.
Wow.
So I do that. I mean, I did that kind of in my first book. I one of the chapters, I don't remember which one it was, but one of my chapters, I changed it around a lot while I was writing the chapter. I mean, I get to the end of the chapter, it's like, oh man, I don't like that. So I go and I erase all that and I just start over. I did that twice in book 1.
Wow.
And I think the end result turned out to be pretty spectacular. Same thing with book 2. I mean, I changed my mind a couple of times in book 2. There's a lot of action in book 2, a lot more action in book 2 than there was in book 1. So I did a lot of adaptations in my mind on what I wanted to do as the chapters unfolded. And I didn't have to have all the action that I did. I mean, a couple of the chapters probably had more action than it needed to have, but I made it more exciting for the reader, and everybody who's read it thought it was great.
So we're talking with award-winning author Larry Deiman, and he's got 2 books out, working on the 3rd one. Would you say, Larry, that you're a better writer going from book 1 to book 2 to book 3?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And that's very subjective. That's it.
Yeah.
That's in our mind. We could look at book 1 and book 2 and think they're both fantastic, right? But we all judge and criticize ourselves. And I would imagine the first book took you 3 years, second book took you less than that. You're probably more proficient at taking the idea and then putting it onto a screen.
Yeah, exactly. When I when I finished book one, um, you're your worst critic, your own worst critic.
Totally.
And when I finished book one, I was satisfied with what I wrote, but I got a lot better at book two. And maybe that's why it only took me 6 months to write the second book. Because, well, first of all, when I wrote book one, I had no idea what I needed to do to turn it into from a manuscript into a book. And I learned a lot from the publisher because of the editing. So I learned a lot of new ways to do things and new ways to word things when I got to book two, which was really helpful because book two, I pretty much wrote book two the way book one should have been written from day one, but they both turned out good at the end, but book one took a lot more editing than book two did. And I did learn a lot of new tricks and I learned more about what I wanted to do as far as how that book was going to end up in book two than I did with book one. One, I wasn't sure about a lot of the chapters going forward, whereas book two, I had a direct idea of what I wanted, and I just wrote it that way.
So I wonder now, when you talk about the editing, do you see the changes that are made? Let's say if the publisher makes an edit or you making, you see what they did, how they reworded things?
Yeah, they send me, what they do is they send me the whole manuscript with their comments on the right side, and then you'll point to wherever, or a line pointing to wherever the correction was. And they give me the opportunity of saying yay or nay. So
okay.
I can agree with them or disagree with them. For the most part, I agree with what, especially with book one, I agreed with most of what they were saying because they're the experts. They were making my book better by the editing that they did. Right.
And it's probably very similar in my vision of it, but probably a tighter way of presenting, let's say, a paragraph, a sentence, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly what they did. They'll make suggestions on the right margin that'll say, this might sound better than what you've got. And I might say, well, no, I like my way. But for the most part, in book one, I liked what their suggestions were. Their editing programs that they use are phenomenal, and they come up with some pretty good ideas. And not to shorten a paragraph, but maybe change some wording so that the paragraph sounded a little bit better, And there were things in my first book where they didn't make sense to the editor, and once they pointed that out to me, it didn't make sense to me either. Like if I started talking about a new character or something, but I didn't define who that character was. See, and I did that a couple of times in the book where I had introduced a new character, but the editors pointed out, well, you didn't tell us where that character came from. Why would Trevor be involved with this character because you didn't tell us who that character is? I can give you a good example that won't do any spoilers, but Jeanette, the high price looker, has a sister, and her name is Bernadette. And in the book, what I did, I started talking about Bernadette halfway through the book, and I didn't I didn't define who she was, just that she was. Where she come from? Are they close? Does she have a family? That kind of stuff. I didn't really define the character, and the editor thought that it would be better reading if I just define who she was to Jeanette, but beyond just being a sister. So I created a family for her with a couple of kids, and
And then the editor said on the right hand margin, you need to make this steamier. You can only hope that they suggest that.
Yeah, unfortunately they didn't. they didn't question the sex scenes.
Hmm.
They, I'm guessing they were steamy enough. I mean, some of the sex scenes are pretty graphic.
Wow.
I mean, not graphic to the point where it's pornographic, but I described the scene pretty well. If you get my
it's call it scintillating, if we will.
yes, very good, very good word. I
haven't used that word in
scenes,
forever, and I probably will never use it again in 10 years. You know what?
probably.
We're just about out of time.
Oh wow! Already, wow.
Like, actually, we're over time, but whatever.
This went by fast.
It does, right?
Yeah.
Actually, we're over 30 minutes right now. Yeah. trevorsadventure.com. Go there, see the books, learn about Larry, learn about the characters, and buy the books. Amazon.com has them, and also links on the website as well. And very, very exciting to know you're into book 3 and a number of chapters in, and waiting to hear what happens next and the whole process.
Yeah. Well, hopefully I'll have more chapters by next week. As we get closer to the end of the book, though, I'm going to have to stop defining what's going on because I don't want any spoiler alerts. But I've got some ideas of where this is going. So we'll get there.
I have an idea. Why don't we? Yeah. This is up to you, but why don't we throw some ideas to the audience next time and do a poll and see what it got an instant feedback.
That's a great idea.
Doesn't mean you're going to do it, but it's going to be okay. So Trevor is thinking about doing this. Should he do this? Should he do this? Or should he do that? Reach out. And
I like that. That's a great idea.
Yeah. Well, I don't write books. I don't write books. I come up with ideas. That's my job. But
works for me. I'm okay with that.
All right, Larry. Great talking with you, and we look forward to catching up again next time.
Yeah. Great talking to you too, Steve. We'll talk to you next week. Take care.
You too. We'll be right back.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you can now listen live on the MyTuner Radio and online Radio Box apps for iOS, Android, and the Amazon App Store. Or check us out online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com or search Podcast Business News Network on onlineradiobox.com/US so you don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.